Okay, welcome to Pirke Abot, chapter 6, Perek Vav, Mishna Bet. Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi teaches, B'chol yom vayom, bat kol yotzet mehar Horev. Every day, a heavenly voice emanates from Har Sinai. Umachrezet ve'omeret. And it makes a decree, it declares, and it says, Oy lahem labiriot me'elbona shel Torah. Woe is to the people, the creations in this world, from the embarrassment of Torah, how they are embarrassing the Torah. Shekol mi she'eno osek b'Torah nikra nazuf. Because anyone who does not toil, work in Torah, nikra nazuf, is called someone who was pushed out. They're an outcast. Shene'emar, and the Gemara, the Mishnah brings a pasuk, Nezem zahav be'af chazir, like a gold nose ring in the ear, in the nose of the snout of a pig. Isha yafa v'sarat tam is like a beautiful woman, v'sarat tam, but she has no understanding, she has no logic, she has no reasoning, she has no intelligence. So, up until this point, we have a Mishnah that seems to be speaking in examples, in mishalim. But whenever the Torah, or the Gemara, or the Mishnah, or the Midrash gives an example, it chose to use that example specifically, and not another example. So there's something inherent in each one of these examples that needs to be mined in order to be able to be understood. But at the same time, it's only really sometimes understood by going through the process. So I want to do that together with you today. Let's start from the beginning now, and then we'll go into the proofs that the Mishnah brings. Because the proofs that the Mishnah brings is going to guide us to understand what the Mishnah's intention here actually is. Like if the point here is study Torah, then just tell me, study Torah. Thou shalt study Torah. That's not what it says. It starts off by telling you that there's a voice that goes out of Har Sinai every day. And what is the voice? The voice is, woe is to the people that sanction, that allow for Torah to be embarrassed. What does that mean? What does it mean to embarrass the Torah?
Not using it, not studying.
Okay, I would not have thought that that's what embarrassing means. I would have thought embarrassing means throw it on the floor, denigrate it.
Values.
Sorry?
Values.
Have values that are antithetical to Torah. That's what I would have imagined, the elbona shel Torah, refers to. But the Mishnah clearly seems to be understanding it in a different way. And how does it understand it? It just says, Shekol mi she'eno osek b'Torah. If you don't study Torah, nikra nazuf, you're considered in the Torah's eyes an outcast. So, are we talking about a person who doesn't study? Are we talking about them being an outcast? Are we saying that there's some sort of punishment? Is that what we're saying? What is this heavenly voice that's going on? I just want to stockpile all of our questions so that we can actually see a clear pathway through what the Mishnah is trying to communicate.
When you ignore something or someone or the Torah, it's as if it's not important. So it becomes an embarrassment to the Torah itself.
So I think that's what I would think using the phraseology of Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. Woe to the embarrassment of the Torah. But then he follows that up and he says, Shekol mi she'eno osek b'Torah nikra nazuf. He's an outcast. If you embarrass Torah, you become an outcast. Like an outcast from whom? From what? So there's a lot of kind of unfinished sentences and thoughts here. And hopefully when we go through the Mishnah quickly and then kind of go through it again a little bit more slowly, we'll start to realize that there's a pattern here and perhaps a beautiful lesson as well. Shne'emar, like it says, so how are we what are we backing up now? We're backing up that a person who doesn't study Torah is considered an outcast. Nezem zahav ba'af chazir, isha yafa v'sarat tam. You have a beautiful woman who has no wisdom. That's like a golden nose ring in the nose of a pig. What is that comparison? What does that mean? Never mind in a Me Too world. Even in a Me One world. Like, you know what I mean? What does that even mean? What's the pretty thing? The pretty thing is the gold nose ring? Which one is the woman? The pig or the ring? Like it's so, the whole thing is so murky. It's very hard to even understand what's going on over here. And the point is that a nose ring, a golden nose ring, for us, that's not an article of jewelry. Perhaps that's as common. But we find even in the Torah that there's, with the story of Rivka and Eliezer, she has a Nezem Zav, she's given a nose ring. So it was an article of jewelry that was meant to beautify. Nezem Zav be'af chazir, to take or to live a life without any wisdom within it, is to attempt to beautify something which cannot be beautified. That's the idea of this pasuk. To put jewelry on a pig rolling around in the mud, it's not just that the jewelry doesn't shine as much as it normally would. That's not, the real question is, what are you even doing? It's almost as if there's a confusion as to where beauty lies. You're looking at something which is filthy, rolling around in the mud, and your idea of making it beautiful is not to give it a shower, is not to clean it, but rather just to stick some jewelry in its nose. What the Torah, what the Mishnah is over here communicating is that when a person doesn't study Torah, they're living a life of filth. They're rolling around in the mud. Now, again, I want to be clear here. This is not some religious higher than thou, holier than thou sentiment. It's literally communicating that the pig, when it rolls around in the mud, is doing nothing wrong. It's not doing something inappropriate. It's not, it doesn't come home and get scolded by its mom for rolling around in the mud. That's just what it does. When you take a human being and you don't introduce them to the study of a higher purpose, higher values, and higher meaning, then what does a human being do? He rolls around in the mud. Anyone wonder, why do pigs roll around in the mud?
Cool.
To stay cool, right? That's the point. Now that you know that, have you ever been hot enough to be like, you know something? I could go for a nice roll around in the mud right about now. I don't have any AC. There's no fan, no electricity. You've never seen a guy roll around in the mud to cool down, even though it will cool him down. Why? Because at that stage of his development, he recognizes that he'd rather the discomfort of being hot than the filth of being dirty. That understanding that there are things that I enjoy, things that would service my comfort level in this life, but things that I just won't do because it's dirty, it's unclean. That's what the Mishnah is trying to communicate here. But the only way that happens is with development of reason in man. Now today, we live in an interesting and developed world to a degree. We live in a world which is religious even when it's not religious. What do I mean by that? There are lots of amazing people out there in the world who do not have religion. Lots of wonderful people who do not even have God. But they're moral, ethical, upstanding people. Correct? They don't steal. They think it's really bad to kill. They're probably vegan. Like, you understand? Really nice people. Yeah, they're wonderful. They feel the pain of the animal. So you look at a guy like that, he seems pretty refined. Now, it's really a bit of an unfair assessment. Because so much of the moral fabric of Western society is actually rooted in religion. So this was something that was handed down as part of Torah, and eventually people just came along and just like, what if I had this but not this? What if I kept this but lost this. But this was what brought us this. To a certain degree, I always love to point this out, the concept of living a life which is not just literally the life of an animal comes from the study of Torah, whether you like it or not. Let me ask you this question. Is murder something that we can all agree is a terrible thing? Yeah? Now, would you say that it is only a religious person that would think that murder is a bad thing? Obviously not, right? However, if we were to actually analyze this from a purely logical or intellectual perspective, that's a very hard position to justify. Take God out of the picture. There is no right or wrong. We got here by ourselves. It's a natural progression, some sort of evolutionary biology that brought us to where we are today. So we are just animals. The concepts of right or wrong, where do they come from? Lions kill lions. Why shouldn't I kill someone who's threatening my pride? I use that as a double entendre. You know? I want to eat something. You're walking by. I haven't had time to go get dinner. Why don't I just bite a piece off of your arm? Now, there was a time in human society where they were barbarians. And the irony is, it is much more logical to be a barbarian than it is to be a refined human being. It's more logical until you introduce absolute rights and wrongs, absolute moral values, driven by not a human being that decided that that's the right thing. Because if a human being decided it's the right thing, I'm a human being, why can't I decide it's the wrong thing? So what the Mishnah is telling you is that every day a voice rings out from Sinai and says, woe to the creations from the embarrassment of Torah. Interesting to note, the Mishnah does not say, woe to the Jews. Who got the Torah on Mount Sinai? Jews. So why doesn't it say, woe to the Jews from the embarrassment of Torah? Someone who's not Jewish, do they have an obligation to study Torah? No.
But they have 7
Yeah, but that's not the Torah. Not the Torah. It predates the Torah. So why is it woe to the creations from the embarrassment of Torah? And the answer is, woe to the creations that we, the purveyors of Torah, have not been involved in it enough to have already changed the world. What is going on in the Ukraine today? A war. What is the reason for that war?
Greed.
Putin wants to go into the Ukraine. He wants power. He wants the money. He wants to illustrate dominance. So it's honor, respect, greed, right? He's just deciding that he wants to do that. Uses a propaganda machine, which is unbelievable. Convinces all of his Russian soldiers that they're fighting Nazis again. That's literally what he's done. They can remember when the Nazis were killing their grandparents in the wars in Russia. So he conjures up this image of a Nazi regime, ironically led by a Jew, right? You have these Russian soldiers who, after being captured, there's a Russian soldier, I don't know if you saw this, who just switched sides, now fighting with the Ukrainian army. I mean, unless it's a baller, double move. I don't know. Maybe that's what he's doing. But he said, "You don't know what they've told us." And I've got here, and it's nothing like what they're telling us. So, if there's a world out there where someone could decide that hundreds or thousands of people will die, millions of people will be exiled, why? Because I want to. Power, greed, whatever, then it's not that he's a criminal, although he is. It's not that he's, we are deficient. We are deficient. So there's a man, his name is Elon Musk. Fascinating man. Weird guy, but fascinating guy. And one of his many projects is something called Starlink. Recently, it was in the news because they begged him to flip the switch on Starlink to be able to provide satellite data, Wi-Fi, internet for the whole of the Ukraine. And he's done that. So what you're seeing today, after they've bombed the infrastructure, they can't bomb the satellites. I mean, they probably can eventually, but right now they can't. So the videos that you're watching, the news that you're seeing, the truths that we are being exposed to, as opposed to Russia controlling the flow of information, right, are because of Elon Musk's Starlink system. Okay? Now, the reason why I say that is because effectively what it's supposed to be, Starlink, is a grid of satellites encircling the globe, okay, where eventually there'll be internet for everyone on Earth without a single wire. That's the idea of Starlink. Starlink V1, Starlink V2, etc., etc. I look at the Torah like Starlink. God gave us a system that is meant to encircle the entire world, that is meant to impact the entire world. So one way of judging whether you're doing a good job is by looking and seeing, do I go to classes? Does the Jewish people study the Torah? Do they go to seminars? Are they watching videos on Torah Anytime? But there's another way to measure performance. Imagine for a second you go into work and you're a saleswoman. You're supposed to sell 100,000 pairs of shoes. Two ways to measure your work. One way is, let's go check. Did you punch in? Did you punch out? Did you leave for lunch for 2 hours? Or did you keep it to the 45 minutes that they give you? Let's check the logs. How many emails did you send? How many phone calls did you send? There's another way. Check the freaking inventory. Are all the shoes there? You did nothing. For all your emails and all your calls and all your checking in and all your attendance, you didn't do your job. Says the Mishna, every day a voice rings out from Chorev and it declares the world incomplete. It declares the world worthy of more fixing. And who was supposed to do that job? We were. So the Mishnah is not talking to the people responsible. It's talking to the people who are suffering because of the people who are responsible. And now, in that context, we understand what the Gemara means. The Gemara says, Hakol b'shvil Yisrael. Everything b'shvil Yisrael is for the Jews. That's the kind of line that kind of wakes up the protocols of the elders of Zion in people who are not Jewish. But everything's for the Jews. You think the whole world revolves around you? And the commentators explain that the word bishvil means for, but in Hebrew the word shvil also means a path. Hakol bishvil Yisrael. Everything is in our lane. Now people, when they don't want to do something, they're like, I'm sticking in my lane, that's out of my lane. It's all in our lane. It's all our responsibility. It's not all ours, it's all our responsibility. So when there's a war in the Ukraine, whose fault is that? Ours. Wild. Now, I want to just share an idea, because I know that this sounds crazy. How is a group of people supposed to convince the world of this idea? Like, they have their own ideas. They believe in other things. They value other things. Is it even possible for a tiny fraction, less than even 0.5% of the world's population, is it possible for us to change the world's idea of morality, of ethic? Is it possible? One of the great lines is, one of the great quotes that I always remember in this realm is, never doubt that a small committed group of people can change the world. Indeed, it has always been a small committed group of people who change the world. Everyone in this world for the last 2 years has in some way been buying in to an idea that formed in one person's mind. Could you imagine how many people are on earth today? 7.5 billion? 7.5 billion people living their lives based on an idea that one person thought of. Do you know what I'm talking about? Huh? Masks is one. Purell is another. Social distancing is a third. The whole world has been living with this. And the concept is based on an idea called germs. Who thought of the idea of germs? Huh? What was the doctor's name?
Fauci.
Huh? Not Fauci. I told you originally. Sorry? Wasn't it Pasteur? Louis Pasteur. He probably took her credit.
Because the babies that were being delivered by the nurse were living longer, were surviving much better than the babies being delivered by the doctors. The only difference in the protocol was washing their hands.
Right.
Well, the doctors were doing autopsies, right?
Yeah, the doctors were doing autopsies.
In the 2 clinics.
And having to deliver the baby.
So I said, he may have taken the credit.
He noticed it.
Whoever it came from, him, her, one person. So one person has an idea, the transfer of germ, and we lived for the last 2 years where every person on earth, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, atheist, Chinese, Indian, Israeli, Russian, doesn't make a difference. The whole world, all day long, lived their lives based on the idea of one person. There's many examples of that, by the way. So many examples of this concept. So what that means is that when a person believes in something enough and is capable of communicating, here's the kicker, the relevance of that idea to the mass population. Now it helps if you die if you don't listen. That helps get your message out. Like when people who aren't listening to you seem to die. You know, so he was a little bit helped in that. However, we're no meek people. Our voice has been heard throughout history, and so much of the evolution of moral principles in Western society are based on ideas that Judaism taught the world. So we've done some of it, but not enough of it. So the voice rings out and says, Oy lahem labriot me'elbona shel Torah. Woe to everybody that the people who should know better have not known better and haven't done enough to respect the Torah. What is respect? And this is where you see how this idea fits the verse that we bring. The concept of respect is the recognition of how valuable something or someone is. That is the concept of respect, correct? The lack of that knowledge is disrespect. So if you see a person who's a big donor who gives lots of money to charity and you don't say thank you, you don't acknowledge that they're the reason why you have the synagogue or the school or the hospital or whatever, you're not showing respect to someone who is very important and critical in the creation of this thing that you're actually benefiting from. Yes? Says the Pasuk exactly that point. Nezem zahav be'af chazir, isha yafa v'saratam. Some people spend all their time beautifying the wrong thing. Fix the house, buy a nicer car, get Botox, do your nails. You got the gold ring in the nose, but you're still in the mud. As a human, you're still rolling around in the mud. Are you working on your anger? Are you working on your arrogance? Do you have compassion for others? Do you feel the interconnectedness of humanity, of the Jewish family? Do you understand your role and your mission in your life? What you're supposed to do for your family? It's not just about birthday parties. All of these things, if you're respecting the wrong thing, that's oy lahem laberiyot me'elbona shel Torah. I'm reminded of an unbelievable story, the Chafetz Chaim. Although I've heard it said about others as well. One night, comes downstairs, and all of a sudden he sees there's someone in his living room. A thief. The thief grabs what he can to run out. He grabs one of the silver candles, and he runs out the door. And who chases after the thief in the middle of the night? The Chafetz Chaim. He runs. The guy can't believe how spry the rabbi is. Finally, out of breath, he stops the rabbi. He goes, "Here, take it." The Chafetz Chaim holds out his hand. He's got in his hand the other candlestick. He said, "If you had to steal from me, obviously, you're in a very difficult place. You plan on pawning you didn't steal it because you want to use my candlestick. You plan on pawning it. You're not going to get any money for one candlestick. Here's the other. Anyway, with one candlestick, I'm not lighting candles either." I always love that story, because it illustrates this concept, the concept of the respect that the Chafetz Chaim had for rachamanut, for mercy. You see, it's a Jewish thief from the neighborhood. You understand what's happening, but you have every right to tackle him. Hit him over the head with the other candlestick. You finally caught up to him. Take the other candlestick back. They tell the story of Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, who was on a train. And someone gets angry at him. So they grab one of his gloves that was sitting on the seat, and they threw it out the window. And instantly, Rabbi Yisrael Salanter grabs the other glove and throws it out the window. He said, "I threw it out the window. I was mad at you. Why'd you throw it out the window?" He goes, "Because I'm not going to use one glove. Someone's going to find it. At least let him have a pair of gloves." How does someone think like that in that moment? The answer is, it matters how much respect, how much weight you give to your anger, to your revenge, to your feelings of self-righteous indignation, versus thinking about another person. It's wild that that's a possible thing. So the question I think that this part of the Mishnah is asking is, what are you beautifying in your life? What are you spending time on? What are you spending effort, money, focus on? Bandwidth? What are you beautifying? When you think about the way that you're taking care of yourself, in what way is that manifesting? And if there's other things that are not so important that you spend lots of time on, and the important things, you're fulfilling this verse, a golden nose ring in the nose of a pig. I remember a while ago, there was a young girl that had been dating this guy for quite some time, and she was unsure if she wanted to progress in the relationship, if she wanted to kind of move forward and get married to this guy. I said, "Okay." I said, "Tell me, what's your What's the conundrum? What are you thinking? She said, I'll tell you the truth. He makes me laugh. He does really well for himself. Easy on the eyes, But he has an explosive temper. I said, what do you mean when you say explosive temper? Were you afraid? Were you afraid when you were with him that something would happen to you, did you feel unsafe? She says, yes, I did. I felt unsafe. That's on the one hand, he has this negative character trait. On the other hand, he has all these positive things. And I was reminded of this pasuk. A golden nose ring in the nose of a pig rolling around in the mud. All of those benefits, all those wonderful things, what are they worth if you don't feel like the very minimal level in a relationship is that the person should feel love, connection. Here, you worry he's going to beat you up. You don't even have to be sure about that. Even if you're unsure about that, that's enough. He's beautified all these other things, and you're focused on the shiny gold nose ring in the nose of a pig. This should not be a question. Your name is not Miss Piggy. You should not be marrying a pig. She says, well, maybe he could get over it and maybe he'll change. And I said, and maybe he won't. I said, if he wants, let him go on his journey of change. And if he comes back to you and he's changed, we'll have the conversation. You can't marry someone expecting that they will change. You can hope someone will change. You can think someone might change. You could believe in them, but you cannot expect it. So if it's something that you could live with, if it stayed the same, by all means, believe, hope, cheerlead. If it's something that it's unconscionable, then you can't expect, you can't hope, you can't pray. You have to assume this is going to be around forever. Imagine being a battered wife before you even got married. But when we take these extreme examples and we smile and we're like, yes, that's right, it's a little harder when it boomerangs back to us, in our life experience. When the parents believe that they want to give their children a really good life, so they work really hard. And the parent that the child gets at the end of that workday, if the guy comes home, if the wife is even there, is running on fumes, zero patience, zero time for them. And the excuse is, and the reason and the logic is, and I don't even doubt that this is true, was in order to give the child a better life. And did they give them a better life? They did. Nicer house, nicer shoes, better school, but no parent. Nezem zahav ve'af chazir. That's isha yafa v'sarat ta'am. This beautiful woman, she has no brains, nothing to her. You know why we use that example? Because every man who sees this beautiful woman, he only finds out that she's an idiot after he engages with her. After he comes over, sits next to her, after he fights with some guy at a singles dinner to sit next to her. And then he finds out she's just a bimbo. She's just hair and nails. Isha yafa v'sarat ta'am is the example of the Mishnah for all of the worldly pleasures that call out to you and say, look how beautiful I am. Look how important I am. I'm going to change your life. It just won't be the same if you're driving this car. But if you're wearing this watch, the other day I had to buy a watch for my son-in-law. So I went on one of these websites and I made the mistake. Instead of clicking price low to high, I clicked price high to low. And this is a sale website. And they had watches that were 50% off on sale, selling for over $200,000 at half price off. I'm thinking to myself, at a bargain like that, how can I say no? You're wearing an apartment on your wrist. That is a fleet of cars that may or may not be waterproof. Right? Are you with me? It's wild. You know what the funny thing is? After all that, what does the watch do for you? Tells the time. And you know what else tells time? A $10 watch that you could buy, your phone even. Yeah, you don't even need your watch now. It's wild. We spend all this time beautifying, respecting the wrong things. So when you say when you complain about how much a school costs, or when you complain about how much that Jewish tutor is charging, but you'll happily pay the same $100 to a woman from in the salon to do your nails, you chose your nails over eternal life, over morality, over Torah. It's wild. Now we don't think of it this way. So we've budgeted all this money for nails and hair and suits and shirts and boots and cars and everything. And the Torah is like, ooh, pick me. And you go into Eichler's, you're like, do you have this in paperback? Hardcover is so expensive. It's $26. The Torah is like, dude. All right. Ve'omer. I want to circle back with a solution to this conundrum in just a minute. Ve'omer, and it says, Ve'aluchot ma'aseh Elohim hema. The luchot, they were the work of God. Va'michtav michtav Elohimu, and the writing was the writing of God. Charut ala luchot, they were engraved on the luchot. Al tikreh charut, don't read engraved, ela cherut, rather read it freedom. She'en lecha ben chorin, there is no free man or free woman, ela mi she'osek betalmud Torah, only someone who studies Torah. Did you hear that? You cannot be free unless you study Torah. What do you mean? Abe Lincoln, Emancipation Proclamation. I know it wasn't he that wrote it, it was a midwife, but Emancipation Proclamation, freedom. The answer is, outside of Torah, there is no freedom from a master, there is only switching masters. So you could go from one king to another king, or you could go from one king to a desire, which becomes your king. If you're obsessed with the way you look, looks are your king. What does a king do? He makes decrees that you can't do anything about. You wake up in the morning, you don't like the way you look, you have a terrible day. Who's the king of you? Your looks are the king of you. Your ego and the way you see yourself, if you're beautiful or not, that's the king of you. If your bank account went down because you foolishly invested in Bitcoin, and then you feel, oh. And then the next day it really goes high, it skies, goes to the sky, you're like, wow. Who's the king of you? Bitcoin. You understand? What that means is that if there's something that animates you, and it is something outside of the realm of Torah, then you are forever a slave. Now, one could ask, Well, then why is a person who studies and keeps and follows the Torah not also a slave? And the answer is, he is. You keep the Torah, you're also a slave. But, didn't the Mishnah just say, doesn't the Torah guard your life? Doesn't that mean that the Torah is your king? You're still a slave. What's the difference between Torah and Bitcoin? The Torah and looks, Torah and status, Torah and honor. The answer is there isn't. In fact, the greatest Jew ever lived, his name is Moshe. What is the appellation that is granted to Moshe right at the end of the Torah? Moshe is called Eved Hashem, the servant of God. So why are you free if you're the servant of God? This is wild. Ready for this? It is only God where the conundrum, where the paradox of being a slave and a master is both simultaneously achievable and possible. Only with God could you be simultaneously a slave and a king. Only with God. Why? Okay, but if it's by his leisure, then you're not the king. Anyone know? Yeah? Let's hear. You guys, you're rocking it.
Freedom from and freedom to.
Okay.
Being freed from slavery and being freed to serve Hashem.
So you're free from that, but really you're still a slave. You're a slave to God, but you're free from everything else.
So I think there's two parts of freedom. You can be free from something, right? Okay, now I don't have to work 9 to 5 every day. I don't have to this. But are you free to do something else? So like Torah, I would imagine what we're saying is like, you're free to be the best version of you.
Okay, since I'm obligated to be the best version of me, I'm still a slave. Right? How about I want to be the worst version of me? I want to be the guy who's, sitting there, just with a bottle of whiskey and a bottle of ketchup and someone just shoving hot dogs in my mouth. And I'm drinking and I'm watching TV. Someone else, and my legs are up, I'm getting a massage. Maybe that's the me I want to be. And I'm not allowed to be. I'm not allowed to be that man. I'm not allowed to be.
You're in the mud, you're not in the game.
But again,
You're in the mud.
if I have to,
Which is okay.
then I'm not free. Can I use Pirke Abot versus Pirke Avot? Hamlacha meruba. There's so much work. Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor. Yet you don't have to finish the work. And yet, what's the end of that Mishnah? Velo ata ben chorin li batel mimena. So you just told me that, what's a ben chorin? A person follows the Torah. Earlier in Pirke Avot we said, Velo ata ben chorin. The answer here is not some clever trick. It's not. It's a paradox that is impossible with anything other than God. Ready for this? This is powerful. If I'm a king to my greed, the greed takes from me, correct? If I'm a king to if I'm a slave. If I'm a slave to a certain king, a president, a system, a societal urge, I'm a slave to that thing. What if God's kingship took nothing from me ever and kept everything that I did for it and gave it back to me? Then I am simultaneously a slave and a king. God cannot take anything from you. He's an infinite being. You can't give him anything. Every shred of work that you do, ultimately you wind up doing. Who's the beneficiary of your mitzvot? You are. In olam haba, in olam hazeh. All of this work that I do for God, I'm a slave to him. But who receives all of it? Only me. It comes to my account. I am a simultaneous slave and king. With everything else, this paradox is not possible because you're either one or you're the other. Why do we mandate it if you're free?
What was the question?
Why do we mandate it if you're free? Sorry? One answer is get schar. There's a deeper answer than that. She said, I asked, so why are we mandating this? Just work for yourself. You're doing all this mitzvot of God, but who receives it all? You receive it all. Hashem doesn't like take some sachar off the side. He's not like, oh, this is amazing. Thank you for doing this for me. I really needed this pick-me-up today. This is so nice of you, Gila. So wonderful that you came out and you prayed this morning. All these other people cursing me out, and then there you are. I was really starting to feel like I needed to go to God shrink. That's not a thing.
But the free will
It's
wouldn't
not the
exist.
natural inclination to do all these
To keep
things.
you out of the
So
mud.
it's like a help, it's like an incentive almost to help you, help yourself.
So-
Like, help me, help you.
So I have the possibility of freedom, but the inability of freedom. The inability to chase something that I'm not forced to chase. Now there's a lot of discussions, and I'll explain that in just a second. A lot of discussions revolving around what you just said. Do you get more reward for something that you're commanded to do, or something you're not commanded to do? At first thought, everyone would think you get more reward for something you're not commanded. Look, I did extra. But actually, that's not the case. Gadol mitzuveh ve'oseh, greater is someone who's commanded to do something and does it, mishe'enu mitzuveh ve'oseh, from someone who's not commanded to do something and does it. That's one angle here. But there's a much more profound angle. According to the Zohar, sometimes I meet with guys, and they'll tell me, Rabbi, I don't believe that human beings were designed to be monogamous. It's like, shut up. On the surface level, he's right. On pig level, he's right. We were designed to roll around in the mud and want the worst things and love unhealthy food and crave, terrible things that are not meaningful and are not important and chase after ego and greed. It's almost like we hate ourselves for wanting it, but we still want it. Anyone want to get that? I think someone is getting a phone call.
Whatever code is that?
One of those bags.
No, it's coming from there.
I don't know. My foot is off.
I'm not pointing.
I think it's
over there.
No, it's not. It's not. It's here.
I can hear it coming from there. That's so funny.
Can I hear it from there?
All right. That was very cool, though. We're all like, it's there, it's there.
No, it's no sound. You don't even know where it's from.
Okay. The Zohar explains that human beings were designed to be part animal. This part of us, it's animal. And on a certain level, that part of you can't help itself. Man wants to be faithful, can't help himself. Still is, enticed by someone else. He could know in his head that his wife or his girlfriend's better for him. Still, he's drawn after it. You could be the most honest person in the world, but there's a chance to do something it's only a little dishonest. In the mind, you're still thinking, I can't, should I? It's a difference. Everyone does it. Right? We can't help ourselves from having those initial thoughts, feelings, urges, desires. That's the animal part of yourself. But there's another part that fights the good fight and says, no, you're better than this. You're smarter than this. You're stronger than this. You're holier than this. This is not in the realm of your possibilities. Do you know what gives the neshama that power to fight back?
Hashem.
How did Hashem give the neshama that power to fight back? Where is the body's desires coming from? It's natural, physical essence. God imbues the neshama with fighting power by commanding it. You can't do that. You must do this. The mitzvot are the roadmap, are the programming of your neshama. If you're not commanded to do that, you stand zero chance of being able to withstand your physical self. Zero. You understand that? Let me give you the Gemara. Gemara says, Il maleh, right? Il maleh hakadosh baruch hu ozero. If not for the fact that God was helping you, a person would never be able, lo yachol lo, he would never be able to overcome his evil inclination. Why? And this is so deep. Who programmed your evil inclination? God did. What's going to fight the natural inclination that God programmed to desire these things, to want those things, to have those urges? What's going to fight that? Only another commandment of God. Your body's commandment is sin, 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 desire, 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 desire. And your soul's commandment is Anochi Hashem Elokecha, Asher Hotzeticha Me'eretz Mitzrayim. In the command itself was the implementation into the soul for its fuel, its power to be able to fight back. And you know what? Sometimes win, then more often win, and eventually, hopefully, always win. Or almost always. Okay? We look at this now and we see it with fresh eyes. HaKadosh Baruch Hu hands the Jewish people the Luchot. And what's on the Luchot? The writing of God. Charut. It's engraved on Luchot. But actually, the engraving on the Luchot was not regular engraving, it was miraculous engraving. What was engraved? What was miraculous about it? It was engraved on two sides. What does that mean? It doesn't mean that you engraved a letter, Aleph, on this side and an Aleph on this side. It means that you made the letter Aleph come through the paper. It went all the way through the whole of the stone of the Luchot HaEven. It came through like this. That was the letter. It went one side through to the other. What made it miraculous is that there are some letters that have a middle part. A samach, a mem sofit, it has a middle. So if you make a circle like this in the luchot, what happens to the bit in the middle? It falls out. But in the luchot, the middle part of the samach, it stayed suspended in midair in between the circle around it. Miraculous. But the question you always have to ask is, when God does a miracle, why did he do that miracle? Nice trick one, good one, God. Like, that was pretty awesome. What was the purpose? God doesn't do unnecessary miracles. He doesn't show off. Why'd God do that? And the answer is, Cherut al haluchot. What God showed humanity is that the Word of God is so powerful, it can penetrate the physical from one side to the other, leaving not a shred of desire, of urge, of problem, of pettiness, of inferiority complex. It can go one way, straight through the person without anything left. Which is why, by the way, when they had the first luchot, for the brief time that they had them, their Yetzer Hara was eliminated. That's what Chazal tell us. Charut. It wasn't cherut. Engraved means on one side. It was driven through the entire physicality of the Shnei Luchot HaEven. That's what cherut means. Cherut means I'm completely free of any of these things, of any of these problems, of any of these issues. Do you know what the cost is? Do you know what the process is to get free? To be ordered to be free. You must realize that this is a must. Lo ata ben chorin. you are not free. But if you achieve the non-freedom of being completely subjugated to a higher life, the life that God prescribes, what are you in the end of that day? You are completely free. That conundrum, as I said, is only possible with God because God is a pass-through. Doesn't keep any of it for himself. His intentions are only for your benefit. The way I like to imagine it is if a father tells a child, you're going to work, and every day when you come home, you have to give me $5 from your paycheck. The kid's angry, he's yelling, he's screaming, you're not the boss of me, I'm doing this work, this is child labor. Father's like, I don't care, my house, my rules. Every day, $5, $5. He complains, he moans, he cries. Anyway, grows up eventually. Meets a beautiful girl, time to get married. His father says, come to the house before you get married. Comes around the house. And he opens up a suitcase, and in a suitcase, it's packed with $100 bills. And the kid says, what's this? He says, well, you're starting a new home. I wanted to help you buy your first house. He's like, that's so generous of you. He said, don't thank me. This is all your money. All those times I took $5 from you every day, I took it, I invested it, and all this is your money. It's all from you, for you. What would have happened if the father didn't force the child to give him the $5? Have the child yell, scream, you're so bossy, you're so controlling, you're so manipulative. He would have spent it on ice cream or on sneakers. And now he has a home. That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing with his forcing of us to keep mitzvot. He is building for us Chaye Olam Nata B'tochenu. He's building for us the eternal world, the home of Gan Eden, the spiritual development that happens when a person lives that way, not just in the world to come, but here as well. And the Mishnah finishes and says, "She'en lecha ben chorin ela mi she'osek b'talmud Torah v'chol mi she'osek b'talmud Torah harei ze mit'aleh." Why is all this true? Because when a person learns Torah, harei ze mit'aleh, he cannot help but become elevated. Shene'emar, like it says in the pasuk, umimatana nachaliel. It's describing when the Jewish people were moving from one area in the desert to the other. Umimatana, from the city called Matana, Nachaliel, to the city called Nachaliel. Uminachaliel Bamot, from Nachaliel to Bamot. Says the Gemara, what does this mean, these cities? These cities are allegories. Umimatana, from the gift, Nachaliel. They went to become the portion of God. Nachala. And from becoming the portion of God, i.e., when God says to the Jewish people, "V'hitem li am segula," you will be for me a treasured nation. What happens when the Jewish people invest themselves in that treasure? They put all their, in that treasure chest. U'minachaliel bamot. They go from there, bamot, to the highest places. Like the pasuk says, "Ve'ata al bamotemo tidroch." I don't know what you think you're doing when you come here every week. I don't know what drives you to come to this class. I'm not sure. Torah, good. Lunch, growth. But in truth, this is what it is. Kol mi she'osek b'talmud Torah, harei ze mit'aleh. You become elevated. You are trying to elevate yourselves. That's what you're doing. If this class is not elevating you, leave. Go find one that is. Hare zu mit'aleh. A person should be thinking that in all the times and all the classes and every chance that they get to study Torah, how am I being elevated? Am I becoming elevated? Am I moving bamot to a higher place? Because the only way for you to elevate someone else is to be in a position where you're not at the bottom of the well with them, but you're standing on solid ground and you can pull them up with you. And if every day a voice comes out from Sinai and says, woe is to the creations, from the Elbonah shel Torah, from the embarrassment of Torah, where people are not treating it with the proper respect. What does it mean to treat Torah with the proper respect? To recognize what it does for you. You recognize that the donor gave money to the hospital. You recognize that your husband bought you or did something really nice for you. You recognize that your children worked really hard to fix the house when you came home with your baby, so it would be beautiful. That recognition, what did you do for me? The Torah says, recognize me. See what I do for you. And if you saw that this was something that elevated you, what would you do for someone else? You'd give them as much Torah as you could, because you'd want to elevate them. But sometimes we don't see the Torah that way. So it's just our weird little thing that we do. Whatever, I just have this thing I do. I just go to this class, whatever. And study this book. Yeah, it's the Jewish Bible. You probably heard of it. I'm reminded again and again of a conversation I had with a wonderful young man in my kollel. I studied by Rav Yitzchak Berkowitz's kollel. I grew up religious. I went straight through the system, all the hardcore yeshivot, etc., etc. So, then when I came to the yeshiva, there was a guy there who was a Baal Teshuvah. He grew up with no religion. Then he did Teshuvah. He started learning. Eventually he went to a yeshiva. Eventually he started a kollel, and he's in the kollel together with me. His name is Gedalia. And we were sitting down one day during lunch. And this was remarkable. Ready for this? He sits down with us, and I said, so where are you from? We just met. This guy's learning the kollel with us. Maybe I know him for a couple of days. Serious guy, learns, good head on his shoulders. I said, so tell me, how'd you get here? He goes, well, I didn't grow up religious at all. Decided that I was going to go backpacking through Asia. In order to pay for it as a student, what I was going to do was I was going to teach English along the way. So all through China, all through Japan, he's teaching English as he goes from place to place, and he's getting paid whatever he's getting paid. Use it to stay in the hotel, go buy some food, carry on to the next place. And that's how he's moving through Asia. I said, okay, this is how is this related to Judaism? He says, anyway, we bumped into a Chabad house somewhere, middle of nowhere. Slowly but surely, he realized that there was something here, something important. And so he decided to take a trip to Israel. Anyway, he excuses himself. He has to go to the bathroom. So I look at my chavrusa, my study partner, who's also an FFB from birth, right? Also grew up religious. And we looked at each other, we're just thinking about this guy, backpacking alone through wherever, just giving English classes as he goes. And we just look at each other and this guy finds his way to Israel. And we're just the two of us are just wow. That is so impressive. That is so cool. Would I have done that? Would I have been able to do that? I don't know. And he comes back from the bathroom and he continues his story. He says, and then I came to Jerusalem. And as I'm walking past one of these little schools, I hear an entire classroom of children chanting the Mishna. I don't know what they were saying, but I could see that it was a Jewish text that they were reading, a Jewish book, holy book. And all these kids, they were just able to read it properly, sing it out loud, so confidently. And I looked at these kids, and I was just thinking to myself, wow, how amazing. These kids are 5 years old, 6 years old. They're able to say the Mishnah. They understand what they're saying. They're connecting to this deep wisdom. I don't think I could have done that. And we finished lunch together, and I turned to my friend, my study partner, and I was like, how interesting that we looked at him in his life. We don't know, how does he know the language? How does he know Japanese? How does he know Chinese? We're like, wow, this guy knows these languages. He's traveling by himself. We're looking at his life and saying, wow. And when he finally comes to our life, what does he say? Wow. People that grow up with tradition oftentimes don't understand what would have made this person, this successful businessman, this intelligent, why would they change their whole life? Why would they throw everything away to come closer to? Why do people go through conversion? Like, it's not easy being a Jew. Why are they doing that? Why would someone, basketball player, hockey player, guys in finance, he has his life set for him. He's happy. He's got meaning. He's got whatever. It's great. Why is he coming to us? Oy lahem labiriot me'elbona shel Torah. If you don't understand that, you don't respect your own Torah. If you don't want to share what you've learned, you don't respect your own Torah. Because I'll tell you this, if you had the cure for corona, do you think you would keep it to yourself? If someone tells you, I can't smell, lost my smell in COVID, and you knew somebody would get their smell back, you'd be unable to hold yourself back. You're like, I'm sorry to interrupt. I know it's really weird to butt into someone's conversation on the subway, right? Please don't stab me. But I know there's this amazing new medicine, herb, whatever. Because you know the value of what you have to that person. So forget what's awkward. Forget whether you want to share it. Are you constantly sharing Torah randomly with people who have no background in Judaism? No? Then you don't respect your Torah. If you've never interrupted a conversation and said, I had this amazing Parsha class on that once, you don't respect your own Torah. You don't respect its ability to be transformative, to elevate. That's what Har Sinai says. God chose me to bring heaven to earth. And earth is basically saying to heaven, thank you very much, we're good. And Hashem's like, but it's the best. I promise Torah is awesome. And they're like, yeah, no. Oy lahem lebiriyot me'elbona shel Torah. Turn that story upside down. Share what you learn. Be focused in your learning processes, in figuring out how will I elevate myself through what I've learned. What are my battles? What am I respecting? Who is the king of me? And when a person figures out how to ask these questions, how to motivate themselves, how to build themselves up, how to rise min nachali el bamot, then the Torah feels like it made this journey all this way and it was worth it. Thank you so much for listening. See you next week.